let's start to talk about this Vray render panel. For now, let's point out that we have here 5 general sections. I would like to say from the start that you don't have to know every single functional button from here. We will try to talk about them in a way that they unfold their use as we will progress. Usually beginners are scared of so many functions, but I would like to explain the logic of how we use this panel rather than trying to explain buttons in an order that this is the first button, it does this is the second one, and so on. So we have here 5 general sections. We have Common, we have Vray, GI, Settings, and Render Elements. We talked in the previous lesson about that we use Common to input our image size. Let's input here 2000 by 1000 pixels. We will start with this 2:1 ratio. If we would press render here, or we can press render here as well, we can see that our render is black. It's black because we don't have anything in our scene. Second, because we don't have any light. Our image size is 2000 by 1000 pixels. You can see it here. We will talk soon about lights. I'm not jumping forward. For now, let's create just a simple Vray light so we can have a minimum, the most simple scene. I'll create a teapot. This will be any 3D model or object, but we need to see it. Without lights, we will not be able to do that. This is our future render. It's a very simplified version, but this is how you will obtain any render from now on in Vray. Next, we have Vray. You can see here a lot of functions. For the start, we said that we need to enable Vray frame buffer, so we can use Vray's render window. When we press render, you can see this window appear. Here is our size, we said. This is our render, and this window got a lot of functions around it. We will get to them as we proceed. Here we set our quality, the way how Vray renders our image, what filters we use, what type of render we use, what level of noise we use. This is directly linked to the time of your render and your image quality. And some other functions as well. We will get to them. For now, this is just to understand the main idea, what these functions are about. Next, we have GI. GI stands for Global Illumination. It refers to the techniques used to simulate in our renders the indirect illumination that we obtain from our light source or sources, or we can call it a bounced light of the surfaces of our interior, if we talk about interior design. Global illumination helps us to create more realistic and natural looking renders by accurately simulating how light is interacting in our real world. We have here a few methods of using GI. We will talk about them a bit later. They have their pluses and their minuses. Next, we have the settings. For now, I would say that we will leave this as default. Here are a bunch of settings that influence the system, but it's not a question of the start. Default will be just fine. And finally, we have here render elements. We talked a bit that they are a key, one of the keys to photorealism. They are additional passes generated during rendering, and they capture additional information about the scene. And this information is about lighting, reflections, refractions, shadows. Here we have as well Vray denoiser, an instrument that cleans up our image if we enable it, and we will do that. All these elements are rendered separately and can be used in post-production to achieve greater control over our final render. We talked about post-production a bit. This stage is very important for giving our raw image that we obtain from 3ds Max a retouching effect. This increases how our final image will look. We adjust the contrast, the highlights. We also use these elements, well, not all of them, of course, some of them, Depends what we are doing, but in general it looks like a panel with layers that usually are used later in Photoshop, mostly, as almost everyone are using Photoshop to adjust their images. So in conclusion, we have here 5 sections. Mainly we will use Vray. As in common, we install only our image size usually, and GI usually is using a template. We'll talk about that. So Vray, we can say it's the most used and important one. We will start to talk about them as we proceed.